So welcome everyone. Thanks for attending our webinar today on how communicators can help transform organizations into the modern digital workplace. We recently presented this talk at the IABC World Conference and wanted to take this opportunity to share it with those of you who were unable to attend in person. So I'm here today with my colleague, Brian Edwards.
Hello.
And my name is Mallory O'Connor. We're with Habanero Consulting. As an organization, we're really focused on creating amazing workplace experiences inside organizations for their employees and also for their customers. We collaborate a ton with communicators as we bring our client strategies for employee experience and communication to life through the technologies that we create. We've been around as an organization since 1996, always with a focus on helping to humanize the workplace. We help our clients with experiences like onboarding and culture, performance management, and digital workplace strategies. And we're really well known for our intranet and portal work, as well as a process that we've taken on recently about taking one of the most inhumane processes in the workplace, records management, and taming it with our user experience process. And we also work with enterprise to create amazing experiences for their customers. So let's just jump into the presentation. I'll hand it over to Brian for the next part.
Thanks, Mallory. I figure we should start with a little bit of context. A common term we hear out there is this future of work, which is, if you think about those terms together, future makes it seem like it's somewhere out there and it's not close by. And I really think, like the proverbial frog in the water, what we're seeing is changing now. The workplace is actually different today than it was 10 years ago, and day by day it's changing. So let's talk about a little bit about the trends that are impacting the way that we're working. The first one is this concept of the industrial era versus the post-industrial era. And there's so much data on this. When we use the word industrial, what researchers tend to refer to is that period where you were manufacturing something, like typically an object. And the post-industrial era refers to kind of the non-object-based consumables, so the era of data and analysis and services. They tend to refer to this era as a sort of the knowledge era, or lots of different terms have been thrown out there, the information age. And it's fascinating to note that in the industrial era, there were many things and techniques that were created that were mechanizing the way people need to work. And those things haven't changed for years. There's stuff like pay for performance, management technique, organizational structures were all built around this industrial era. But people aren't doing the same kind of jobs. What we know of people is that the number of routine jobs, those are jobs where people come into the workplace and they're sort of repeating the same tasks they did before, are reducing, and they're reducing quite significantly. And the non-mechanized jobs, those creative jobs, have been on a steady increase. This has started in the 1940s, but in the 1970s with manufacturing changes, we've just seen this on a major rise. So you have this workplace that's full of a bunch of creative people, and they're no longer managing tasks day to day. They're really managing exceptions to the tasks. And how do we manage these people? Well, in some organizations, we still manage them kind of like we're trying to get the exact same behaviors from every single person in the organization. And if you think about the term human resources, it is kind of a funny term because it was built around trying to make people more predictable. We created this entire workplace function around the repeatability of jobs and processes in organizations. But now, because jobs are more creative and we're starting to see employees mapping their own career paths, the journeys in their organizations, we see coaching instead of performance management. There's a lot of shifts in how the workplace is responding to that. One of those is this concept of people not looking to join organizations for the career ladder anymore. There's a researcher out there that did some research around personal performance, like why we do our jobs and how that relates to personal and company performance. And what they found was the two top influencers of high-performing people were play and purpose. So if I show up to my job and I'm doing it because I love it, if there's some piece of it that's just play for me, it's so enjoyable, I come to work because of that, or it's purposeful, it drives meaning in my life, I'm doing it because I know it has a bigger impact. Those two things drive the most workplace performance in organization. And in fact, on the opposite side, if I'm coming into my job because of a career ladder, or because I'm trying to earn more, there's actually a negative correlation to performance. This is definitely starting to disrupt the way we manage people, the way we hire, what people expect when they come into the workplace. And so one of the ideas that have formed around this is how important people's networks are. As we hire people, we really look for how networked they are. And in turn, we also need to support the networks that they need in the organization to get work done. So this has put a lot more pressure on how we think about communication and collaboration within organizations and how we structure to get work done. Examples of that change of structure are things like matrix organizations or holacracy or self-directed teams that you're seeing more and more in sort of organizations that are responding to this new world of work. The other big thing that's changed is this ubiquity of where we work. Wi-Fi and our ability to get access to information anywhere. I'd say the end of the concept of the work-life balance. We're kind of always working and we're always living, and having our work available on our phones and our iPads and wherever we are is a huge change, and it's just ever increasing. So this concept of being in the office versus in the sort of quote unquote virtual office at home or wherever that be is definitely impacting workplaces. And then the notion of knowledge workers turning into like digital employees. It's super funny to think less than 10 years ago, we used to refer to those that were in front of computers as knowledge workers. And those that were out in the field, we maybe call them field workers. And it's sort of actually, now that you look back on it, a really ridiculous term. Like, it's like those in the field didn't have knowledge or something, or those internally were somehow special. And when I was getting this presentation ready, I was looking for a picture that might represent what a field worker looks like. So I Googled iPad and farmer, and what I found was hundreds of photos at my fingertips. And it just goes to express the massive change that we're seeing in that everyone is a knowledge worker. Everyone's a digital employee. We're all working with these tools. We're all making decisions based on inputs and data that we're getting, regardless of where we are in the organization. So those are the major influencers we see, some of them at least, that we see that are impacting what we're about to talk to today, which is the trends that we're seeing in the digital workplace and how organizations are responding to and supporting these influences. So to start off the trends, let's just talk a little bit about what actually is the digital workplace. It's this ambiguous term. It's used a lot. Lots of people are using it in a lot of different ways, and I'll kind of define it for this presentation, perhaps. First of all, there really is no formal definition. No one owns the term the digital workplace, despite how used it is. In some organizations, for example, they're hiring digital officers to manage the digital workplace outside of IT. So there's for sure this thing that exists. What it typically refers to is this concept of modern workplace tools, the tools that we use to do our jobs. And one of the concepts in the digital workplace is that really people are first in it. The digital workplace is putting the people first and helping them get their work done. It tends to refer to the world of communication, collaboration, and the agility people have within their organizations. And some people, like Gardner, they think of it more holistically as the set of tools that help people have autonomy and mastery and purpose in their jobs. That's sort of stolen from Daniel Pink's book Drive, which is what makes us successful individuals in the world. And this was a sort of summary of his work. So that's a broad general definition, but that kind of covers what we're seeing in terms of this presentation, at least. So in terms of those workplace trends, the first one we'll cover is social. Social is really interesting to me. If we put it number one, and you might be thinking, well, that's an old trend that's been around for a while. Why is it actually number one in your presentation? About 3 years ago, some person said everyone needs an enterprise social network. It's the next big thing. We saw lots of organizations trying to rationalize or get on top of deploying these enterprise social networks. And we did ourselves. We have an enterprise social network. We're using Yammer, and it's one of many choices available out there. And what we found, and I think the market has found, is they're obviously not that sort of silver bullet of communication and collaboration. They work well in some situations. They don't work well in some situations. They're complementary to other tools that people have in their jobs. What we found at Habanero was, surprisingly, there are a lot of people who didn't really like using it, or they just felt that information glut was worse when they started to jump into the world of Yammer. So the places where it works really well was when there's an isolated team and they're using it for a really distinct purpose. Our business development team at Habanero, for example, uses it to share stories of things we're hearing in the market with customers. And it's a great tool to keep that team up to speed and up to date on what everyone's working on. One of the things we are seeing be really successful around social is this concept of embedded social, which is social in context of something else. So an example of this is with our customer Goldcorp. What you're looking at here is a page, the safety page inside Goldcorp's intranet called Conveyor. And all around the safety area, you see this concept of embedded social. In that top image, you see the number of views, this concept of likes and commenting sitting throughout all of the solution. If we scroll down the page, these featured news articles like recent safety news all have those same capabilities. And in the case of Goldcorp and what we're seeing with a lot of our clients is it's a chance for communicators to really extend the reach and the utility of the communications they have. In Goldcorp's case, they're really trying to drive a workplace culture of safety. So this has been a really successful way of getting employees to engage further in the storytelling and the events that are happening in their organization around safety. So the takeaway on that is, in the right application, enterprise social can amplify the message. So I'll hand it over to Mallory now to take over the remote and talk a little bit about the second trend that we're seeing in the digital workplace.
So again, this might sound like something that you would have expected to hear a couple of years ago, and it seems again funny to call mobile a trend. It's not new anymore and has been considered the next big thing for a really long time. But the enterprise adoption of mobile has been challenged by things like the complexity of the devices that we're using, as well as the complexities around security within enterprise. And as a result, it really hasn't been a major focus for organizations, but there's some pressure on it now to finally become a requirement in all of the portals that we're seeing. And the reason behind that is that we've been seeing that there's a need to reach out and extend to that sort of field worker or deskless worker scenario to create a meaningful connection with those people who aren't sitting in head office. And many of our clients are struggling with this challenge. The field worker or the deskless worker is often left out of the loop of communication and just outside the reach of sort of traditional tools or intranets. And they might be receiving their updates through completely offline channels like daily huddles or briefings with their managers, or through more traditional processes like email communications or newsletters. So the potential impact of providing information that's vital, like safety or critical updates or emergency information, directly into the hands of those frontline workers. And it could be, the frontline workers could be in mining, as the example in this picture here, or it could be in a retail workforce. All of those pressures are really forcing enterprise, like never before, to deal with mobile. And so this, again from Goldcorp, is an example where for this organization, having a fully responsive experience to reach their hugely distributed workforce was such a massive driver of their employee portal strategy. And for your organization, you might find that in order to get to a business case and to do a ground-up redevelopment to achieve this fully responsive experience might be a ways away for you. In which case, we have sort of a workaround that's been really successful for some of our clients to quickly and easily create an adapted experience of your existing portal in the interim between getting to this more modern experience. So we call this a light responsive approach, and it allows you to leverage the solution you have today and layer in code that adapts the site for an improved mobile experience. So mobile has changed everything about the way that we design experiences. Longer pages, infinite scrolling, and panel design are inspired by the websites that we see in our day-to-day world outside of work. So the key takeaway here is that for communicators is that making mobile an enterprise priority can really help you reach those traditionally out-of-reach workers and can trigger new ways of communication and collaboration because of the mobile experience. And so I'm just going to hand it back to Brian for the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Mallory. So the third trend that we'll talk about is this concept of the digital toolkit. There is a lot of things happening in the digital universe among many of the key players in this game. Microsoft, IBM, Google, they're all providing this sort of digital platform for their tools. I really think in the Microsoft world, Microsoft refers to that as their sort of Office 365 suite. And I really think Microsoft's leading the pack in terms of what's available in the toolkit and a lot of the innovation that's coming out of their organization within those set of connected tools. The landscape is changing, and if you look at the data, you wouldn't think it is. So in 2016, 9 out of 10 Nielsen Norman award-winning intranets were built on SharePoint. So you'd think that looking at this, SharePoint's going to be the de facto platform for these kinds of digital tools, the digital workplace in the future. But the landscape is really dramatically changing, and it's changing really fast. If you look at the Microsoft ecosystem around Office 365, for example, what you're looking at here is a bunch of tools that make up that digital workplace from Microsoft. And SharePoint really is only one small button at the top row. It's that thing called Site. And in fact, it's recently been renamed to SharePoint. And you have those tools, the traditional desktop tools, a bunch of new apps that are all making up this digital experience within organizations. So communicators and people within organizations that are trying to create a digital workplace agenda do need to be on top of all these tools because they're competing for space within your employees' minds. These are the places people are going to get their work done. So you have to kind of be on top of knowing where people are going and stay in front of pulling these tools together for them. The other thing that I think the digital toolkit has kind of disrupted in organization is how we approach technology and how we decide and think of implementing technology. In many organizations, the IT person has often taken an operator role, and that is they listen to the organization, what those needs are bubbling up from within different parts of the business, and then they go and purchase technology and simply operate it. They deploy it and operate it, and a lot of the data that they collect and their success is around running a really efficient and cost-effective organization. But because technology is becoming so pervasive and so important in strategy, we're seeing this need for IT organizations and complementary departments like communications and HR to have to think of rolling out IT as at least and at minimum being a strategist. So sitting at the strategy table, looking at what the business objectives are and applying technology where it makes sense. And in some cases, really being a catalyst. So driving strategy conversations through the lens of what's possible with IT. And this is a major shift in I think the last few years around this concept of the digital toolkit or the digital workplace. So the takeaway here is, each digital touch point's an opportunity to impact that employee experience, and communicators and other people within organizations need to wrap their heads around the new world of work and what that means to how we reach people. Another trend, the fourth trend, is the cloud. And if you haven't or aren't in the cloud yet, I'm pretty sure you're going to be there soon. This is a relatively big impact on the way we think about work. And some of the things we're seeing is, the first one is that there's this concept in the cloud where you're not really upgrading anymore. Things are just automatically updated every time you go in. And we certainly see that on our consumer experiences with our phones and the apps we use. And in the digital workplace world, we're starting to see that with things like Office 365, where there isn't a concept of a big release which lumps a bunch of features. It just happens over time. And so what this does is really impact the way organizations need to think about their intranet. I think that we're going to see the end of the 3-year or 5-year update of intranets, and you'll see more and more organizations adopt this continuous improvement and continuous evolution model. The other thing the cloud's done is it's really disrupted the standard way that IT organizations like to work. And this is probably a picture that represents the traditional command and control process. We have some requirements, we go and collect them, we build something or buy something to deliver on those, and then we manage it. It's done in an orderly fashion. You might even refer to it as waterfall. That's a typical word used to describe it. And what the cloud's done is it's made everything available to everyone all at once. I imagine most people listening in here have at least used Dropbox or solutions like that in the market. And it's so easy to obtain and get those products. And so this guy, the guy with his hands waving in the air, that's the new role of the IT manager. And so with the cloud, there's obviously a new world of having to keep on top of people's needs and also managing this glut of new capabilities that exist out there. A key takeaway on this is obviously you should be in conversations about this in your organization. If you're in a communications role, have conversations with IT around how does this impact the way you manage your intranet long term, and how are you responding to the available nature of these technologies out in the public at large. I'll pass it back to Mallory to kind of go into some other details we're seeing in the digital workplace.
Yeah, another trend that we're seeing is really around the evolution of portals to provide tailored tools to allow employees to really accomplish their day-to-day tasks more easily. And so we're seeing this. Here's an example from a client that we work with called ICBC. This is their employee portal. They deal in motor vehicle insurance and claims. And one of the things that they do really well is you'll see on the right-hand side an area called Toolkits. And that section is tailored to the user based on their role. And it pulls together all of the reference material and information they need to do their job in the form of a toolkit. And so at a very easily accessible approach to get to the information a person would need to do when in front of a customer. And also it's quite interesting because while the default is based on my role, there's also options that I might hold multiple roles. I might also be a manager and might need the manager's toolkit, or I might be looking to extend my role or move into a new role, and I might be interested in what those tools are that I might be using if I take a new job in the organization. So there's some ability to have a starting point for targeting and personalized information, but I'm also able to customize it and extend it for my interests. And you'll see below that there's an area of my links that really allows you, as you go throughout the portal, to add information, to tailor as I go. And this is something that's quite prevalent in this example as well from Conveyor, which is the My Goldcorp page is really a tailored experience. It's an editable sort of dashboard of everything I need to do in my role at Goldcorp. It goes a step further in that it integrates with other office tools like Outlook, and employees are presented with a summary of their communications and their tasks, as well as everything they need to do to collaborate on the teams and projects that they're following or a member of. So portals have really evolved beyond sort of the traditional one-way communication of pushing information out towards employees. They really are a place where everyday tasks are accomplished and inform decisions that employees need to make and strip away the information that they don't need to have. The next trend that we're seeing is the influence of the applications and tools that we use every day outside of work, starting to put pressure on and impact our expectations on the tools that we use at work. So we call this consumerization. And this example is from the Calgary Board of Education. It's a personal learning tool for students. And it uses a bunch of familiar principles that we see in the social conversation world of Facebook, sort of the rich media that we see with embedded videos. And they're used in context to support the teachers' conversations between themselves and their students and the parents, and collaborating around everything that's relevant to the students, from their goals and their learning styles and insights to the classroom work that they do. And so this timeline is also something that we're intimately familiar with, and it's applied to each student to sort of document the course of the year and the conversations that are had. The killer part of this that's really impacted the school experience is that this conversation carries over year, so that in September, the new teacher doesn't need to start all over again from scratch. So the comments and the replies mean that the teacher has that context to start the school year where the student needs to be, and everyone has a better experience. So we're seeing some of the features and experiences make their way into tools like Iris, which was the example that I just showed. There's a whole bunch of other tools that we use that are probably familiar from this list. You probably may have downloaded them through a 30-day trial, into your own environment. Maybe IT said we're going to give this a whirl, or there's just someone who really is just looking to solve a problem in a way that isn't really solvable right now with the tools at their fingertips. So there's this sort of unofficial adoption of tools. We refer to that as shadow IT, because it happens outside sort of the official processes of evaluating software, doing a risk assessment for where sort of the data residency issues could be, or procurement. And so, because of the sort of experiences that we have in the workplace, we're starting to see this sort of gap. We're expecting those really seamless experiences that we have in Dropbox or Trello or whatever we're using either informally at work or in our personal lives. And it means that our expectations within enterprise are really high, and we want our user experience and our collaboration to just work and make it easy. So I have a story about a client of ours who, where the CIO the organization hired his son to come in and do an internship over the summer. And they hired him to come in, and he did his first day, his orientation. He sort of got a sense of what all the tools are. He spent the day sort of struggling through, understanding how all the systems work together. And at the end of the day, he went and saw his dad and he quit. And he said, basically, you guys are living in the past. You really need to up your game. And it was a real wake-up call for that organization to realize that, they weren't meeting the needs of the emerging workforce. And so this gap is really between sort of expectations and the reality of organizations is one that needs to be filled. But it really is an opportunity space. To raise the bar internally, create experiences for employees that are more on par with their expectations. And you'll see likely a positive impact on your business and see some differentiation as well. And it could be showing up in things, measures like improved employee satisfaction, or by extension, customer satisfaction, because we know that organizations that provide better experiences for employees, that extends and shows up as better experiences for customers. And there's also the impact as well on the ability to recruit and retain talent that'll bring your organization forward into the future. And back to Brian.
Thanks, Mallory. So another trend, I guess number 7, is personalization and targeting. This isn't necessarily a new trend again, but it was a difficult trend not that long ago. Allowing people to really personalize their experiences and have targeting was something that was technically difficult. The technology in the past was just couldn't support a lot of personalization, and just the changes of the tools of the last few years has really made a big difference in what we're able to do in this space. And again, responding to the expectations from those end users and consumer-like experiences, we just expect things to be personalized now. So it certainly is putting a lot of pressure on organizations to implement and take advantage of this concept. We have a story, one of our customers, Enbridge, had recently launched a brand new intranet e-link. During the research phase of this project, we went out to the organization and asked. Enbridge is a very complex organization. They're made up of a bunch of sub-companies. There are lots of different industries represented inside of those sub-companies. And so people often don't need to see what other people are talking about. There's a huge chance for finding yourself reading an article that has no application to you. And that's exactly what we found when we did the research. We were out there talking to employees, and what we found is they didn't read the news because they found most of the time it wasn't that relevant to them. So with the new launch of their intranet, we made sure that personalization and targeting were a major part of the way that we built the site. So as we get into the sort of nitty-gritty details of how content authors create content, there's this ability to tag content to different business units, locations, certain projects that people are working on, so that when someone hits the page, this homepage in their reading news, they have the most likely content that's most likely to be relevant to them right in front of them. In the case of Enbridge, I think there's an interesting twist to this, is that we still made the other content available to them, but you'll notice in this screenshot, we've noted it with an audience alert, just letting the person know they might be reading something that might not be relevant to them. So what's great about this example is, yeah, you have the personalization, but you still have that openness for people to be able to see stuff, and these visual cues that the things that you're looking at might not be exactly the thing you're looking at. You can see in a scenario, for example, where you have a complex organization of unionized or non-unionized, or people within different parts of the organization, policies and procedures may differ. This is a really neat way of dealing with that. Another example of personalization is with intranet that we built for Service Credit Union called The Village. And this is just an example of how targeting and personalization can really play a role at making things easier to find. What we're looking at here is one of their account types that they have. And because it's tagged properly, on the right-hand side, you'll notice related products, related procedures, related policies, related forms. This allows for a on-the-fly collection of things to surface that the end user may need in relationship to the thing that they're reading. So this targeting and personalization is a really useful tool for joining together information that might be sitting in disparate locations. So the key takeaway here is look for ways to narrow the content focus, make it easier for employees to find the things they need for their jobs and stuff that's relevant for them while maintaining this flexibility for them. Another trend is people and recognition. Again, something that's always been there, but this is a little nuanced as to what we're seeing right now. I do find it funny that it wasn't that long ago that we would have to sit with executive teams and explain or work with executive teams to try and get photos and photo galleries or people on the homepage of an intranet. There was a lot of thought that those kinds of things were a distraction in the organization, and that's really shifted. Not only is it not a distraction, it's an important element of most homepages and intranets. So you're seeing things like video. This is an intranet site for one of our customers, the Alberta Energy Regulators, that features video on the homepage. But it also features this section down as we scroll down the page called Kudos. And Kudos, we've seen this with a few of our clients, are kind of a embedded recognition system in the organization. I have the ability through this technology to give someone thanks or give someone props for something that they did in the organization, and also create that threaded discussion on it. And this kind of social and really people-oriented kind of capability that bringing out the culture and reinforcing cultural values is a more and more important thing we're seeing on intranets. And what's really interesting is when we were doing the research for this, we were showing mocks of the homepage, and we had this little Kudos widget. And one of the usability participants said, "Oh no, I would never use that." And where they were speaking from is this cultural place of where it just wasn't expected, and it wasn't something that was culturally normal to them. And we had an interesting question as to whether or not it was going to be adopted. So we use executives in the organization and many managers to help drive the behaviors by setting a good example, using it. And what we found was that really shifted the tide of people's expectations around the tool, and many people in the organization started to use it themselves. So the takeaway here is technology can actually drive cultural change. Yes, you need the support from executives within the organization or people that can help drive that change. But once you've had that support, you can use the technology to drive, for example, a culture of recognition. And I'll turn it over to Mallory to kind of close out with the last two.
Mm-hmm. So number 9 is something that we're seeing around collaborative visioning. And for this trend, I really don't have any solutions to share because it's more about a process. And it's a process of creating a shared vision and alignment amongst stakeholders involved in a digital workplace initiative. At Habanero, we start any project by putting people at the center of our research. We do interviews and observation and workshops, and we take a look at data and all the insights that we can get to help shape a vision for the solution that we're going to create. But we really don't do that in isolation. We work side by side with our stakeholders from communications, from HR, from IT, and other areas of the business to pull together those insights and opportunities collaboratively. We build the principles and the framework by which we'll make decisions and the priorities that will guide our initiative into the first release and beyond into a roadmap. The outcome of this is actually more, though, than just a roadmap. It's the secret sauce behind it is really the process and the alignment that we create around that shared vision. So this is a roadmap template that represents some of the critical conversations that we need to have to get to that vision. What are the principles that we're going to agree to that will guide the decisions that we make around the experience that we're creating? What is the value not only to the business, but also to the employee, and how does that show up? What will we do? What's the priority of when we're going to do things? And how are we going to measure the success or the impact of those activities on the business and on employees? So for us, Collaborative visioning is really an indicator of whether you're going to be successful or not in any initiative around the digital workplace. The alignment and expectation management that comes out of that are really, really powerful, and they really provide a baseline for any of the communications that you provide across the organization about the new transformation that's coming. And lastly, I wanted to talk about analytics and data. And we've seen this increasing importance of analytics and data as a function within organizations and around portal measurement and insight. It's interesting that some of our clients, are really at the beginning stages still of analytics and measuring their portal. When we were at the IABC conference, it was interesting to see that most people put up their hands when we asked them who had analytics on their portal, but most of them admitted to the fact that they were pretty basic. There's a big spectrum from the sort of basic analytics and capturing core usage and traffic and that kind of thing. But the more strategic use of measurement is something that's still emerging within organizations and is in fact probably a relatively new experience. So what I wanted to touch on was an example where we've worked through a process with our client, the Royal College of Dental Surgeons in Ontario. It's a recently launched portal where we spent a ton of time developing the vision for the portal, but also the measures and mapping those measures back to the organization's strategy. This is an exercise that we did, and we created a success framework for them where all the features that are represented in the bubbles there link back strategically to the guiding principles and the overall goals or business value of the portal. And thinking strategically this way about analytics means that you can go beyond just traffic and users. It means you can truly understand the behavior that you're trying to encourage in the workplace. The things that were important for them to measure, and this is an example of their people interactions dashboard. We can't share the live data from the dashboard for the junction, but what we can show is how we set it up for them. So here we have one of the measures that's important to the dentist. It's the people finder, because what it does is it indicates employees finding each other through search and supporting one of their goals of reducing paper from having paper-based reference material in the organization and relying on each other and their knowledge instead. Kudos is another indicator for them of employees sharing with each other and building relationships with each other. Kudos on intranets can really make a positive contribution to corporate culture. And so we track things like leaving a kudo, the liking and replying to them. And this is for the dentists, this was very much a net new behavior for them to participate in because they'd never actually even had an intranet before. Another area that was quite influential for them in terms of understanding how their portal was being used was the people profile views. Because what that measure does is that it's an indicator around the goal of supporting people finding and learning about people in the organization. And the People Spotlight is another way that people are learning about each other. We're measuring the views of content like sort of people in the spotlight, the photos that people interact with, as well as the feedback that we get about the portal itself. All of those are considered people interactions. They're important measures for the success of the junction. So organizations have gotten a bit of a pass on taking accountability for the solutions that they create. They might build something that looks great, functions well, but they really aren't measuring the true value of the portal. So our takeaway for you is that you can really get started by starting small, building some accountability and measuring the right things. And you can really be looking towards what I'm sure your organization's already doing on their external facing solutions. And measuring impact and measuring value. And it helps to build accountability for the investment that's been made in the portal and help you make stronger decisions about where to innovate, collaborate, how to change, and how to be armed with the right data to support your decisions moving forward.
Awesome, thanks, Mallory. So that is the 10 trends that we're seeing, kind of summarized some of the big ones that we've been seeing in a top 10 list. One of the things we wanted to do as a takeaway for this presentation is leave people with a little bit of, okay, so I've learned all this stuff, what next, what can I do? So we've summarized a few things that we think are kind of the first initial steps for responding to this change. The first is, if you haven't already and you're in a role that isn't in communication with other parts of the organization, start to forge those relationships. the need for communicators to come together with IT, HR, the chief digital officer, perhaps even the CEO, if this is a very significant strategy in your organization, is at a bit of an all-time paramount high. And if you need to, one of the things that Habanero can do is come in and help facilitate these conversations. We have a great art of the possible approach where we can come in and take examples like you saw today and bridge the conversation and get the juices flowing from those different disparate stakeholders. Another thing that I think is important to do is start the conversation about your digital maturity, and specifically, have the conversation around where you're sitting. What I see in organizations is these tools are being rolled out like an operator perspective. They're not necessarily sitting at the table with the business strategy or in a very positive way being catalysts for change in the organization. And that leaves a lot of stress in the organization. There's a lot of disagreement between how to implement these things and the priority to be placed on them. So having a real genuine conversation around where your organization sits, where you want to sit in the digital workplace rollout is an important step. The other thing I can recommend is looking at perhaps adopting a maturity model. So thinking of yourselves as perhaps a level 0 or a level 1, looking at the path. How do you move from a reactive organization to just one that's optimizing the technology and really helping people get their jobs done? This is what you're looking at here is a maturity model of the digital workplace presented by Gartner and some of their research. And if you Google digital workplace Gartner, this is one of the models that will come up for you. The last one for me, and then I'll pass it over to Mallory, is this concept of mapping your outcomes to something measurable. So Mallory just closed with the example of the dentist, and this is a really important way of getting your head wrapped around what you're trying to achieve with the digital workplace. So in many organizations, what you need to do is kind of create this connection between the usage, how people are actually using the application, and the outcomes that you're trying to drive in the organization. So starting from there, this reduced attrition, increased profit, increased gross margin, or market penetration, and those big picture things, taking a look at those, knowing that you, of course, are probably collecting now page views, user visits, the documents you declare, or whatever those really rudimentary measures are, starting to create the connection between them through things like the employee engagement survey or customer satisfaction data or productivity measures you have. Connect that backwards towards experience that you're creating, this notion of helping people collaborate better or share knowledge better, things that you can actually go out and find out if you are improving on. And then finally, relating that to the technology itself by the events that are helping create those experiences. So the search results that you might get in, or the feedback people are leaving, commentary on news articles. So this is kind of a value chain, if you will, connecting the raw usage data all the way up to the outcomes. So starting to create this, and one for your organization, is an important next step.
And so building on the collaborative visioning approach that I mentioned, I think it's really essential, if you don't have one, to start developing a digital workplace roadmap. And so what this allows you to do is to create a plan that helps you communicate how it relates to your overall strategy, the importance to your users, and what the impact will be for the business as well as the business readiness for it. These governing principles that we talked about, the design principles, are ways that you can come together as a team and align around the decision making. We've actually provided, at the end of the talk, we're going to provide a link to templates for creating just this kind of a roadmap for you, because we feel like that is an essential collective starting point to moving forward in your digital workplace rollout. The last recommendation that we have is the idea of shifting your mindset around experimentation. The idea of not having large upgrades means that we're not rolling out massive change once every 3 to 5 years, as Brian mentioned, but rather changing your mindset to one where you're moving to more of iterative cycles of release. So changing that, these can be small or large. You can have multiple releases in the course of weeks or months, and really focusing your approach to thinking about the build, measure, learn cycle, and introducing that into your organization in small and large ways. You can have large releases and intersperse those with smaller enhancements as well. So bring that to your organization from a communications perspective, and in those conversations that you're having with the other stakeholders on your team. So what we've done is we've compiled a bunch of our best practices and some of our insights, as well as the tools and templates to support some of the recommendations that we're making in this presentation. And we've put them together for you at this URL. But I think this is a valuable collection of information that can help you in the process of the transformation into the digital workplace.
So we're going to close out the presentation with just a quick little conversation around Habanero's Go Internet Accelerator. This was an exciting product that we launched a couple months ago, and it really was built on the concept of trying to make it easier for organizations to leverage a lot of the things that we talked about today. What we found was the bar for some of these experiences was quite high, and we wanted to make it a lot easier for our customers to access some of the capabilities that we presented in today's trends. So we've built the Internet Accelerator for enterprises moving to Office 365, but we also support on-prem SharePoint 2016. And what the accelerator is sort of a set of modules and tools for organizations to help create a sort of digital workplace portal or an intranet. And what you're looking at here is the homepage, a highly stylized news experience, a common and typical navigation, the search, People Finder, and My Work, some of these things we showed you throughout the presentation today. And as we move down the page, we see that new, more modern, mobile-friendly design with the panel design, the longer page scrolling, some of the features we talked about today, like kudos. All of this is built into the Go Internet Accelerator, and we've wrapped all these capabilities and features together in a package that has no license fee. So we're giving this away to our clients. So we'd really love to, if you're interested, have a chance to sit and personally talk to you about what's included in Go, and perhaps talk about whether it's a fit for your organization, do a demo. So get in touch. Mallory and I are two of the many people at Habanero who can would love to chat with you about what's happening in your organization and get to share more about what we're seeing in the internet space and what perhaps we can do to help you in your organization. There's our contact details. Thanks.